Hey, is platform engineering just for cool kids? You're watching Techstrong Gang. Hi, everyone. It's Alan Schimmel. Welcome to our Thursday edition of Techstrong Gang. You know, I love doing Thursdays on Techstrong Gang because it means tomorrow's Friday. And especially for me, I've got about another week before I head out to Italy on vacation. So I'm in hurry up and let's get there mode. But there's so much going on. Everybody and their mother is having a conference this week, it seems. We've got people all over the place at conferences. There's, as usual, a lot of AI noise, a lot of stuff going on. And we've got a great panel to discuss it with you today. Let me introduce you to them. First, I want to introduce the new kid on the block. He's not a new kid to me, though. He's been a friend of mine for 15 plus years, maybe more. He's a security person extraordinaire, and I've seen him rise up from the trenches of security to CISO to entrepreneur, founder. I'm thrilled to have him on here, my friend Fred Wilmot. Hey, Fred, how are you, man?
Great, brother. Thanks for having me.
I hope I didn't embarrass you, but give people just a real sense. What are you up to these days?
So I have a company called the Tech Team. We're building a way to shift the detection engineering problem into a continuous and autonomous delivery mechanism instead of the static rules written by experts. And so think about that as reducing this problem of complexity and tech sprawl and, intellectual elitism down to 15 minutes of adversary to detection deployment. And it's been a lot of fun, and I think always appreciate the support and the feedback loop. So thanks for that, Jim.
No problem, Fred. All right. Also joining us, I haven't had the pleasure of seeing her on for a while. She's been on. It's just I've been off. Our friend, I assume you're home in Austin, Ann Ahola Ward. Hey, Ann, how are you?
Good. Great to see you. It's been a while.
It has, and I'm glad you're here. Then joining us from his perch up in Silicon Valley, where he's the master of all he sees of his domain there. Our Silicon Valley editor, John Swartz.
You keep laying on. Yeah, I'm good. Hi, Alan. I have to admit, I'm playing a little hurt today. It's allergy season, but like the great Willis Reed, I'm hobbling out of the tunnel on one leg to perform today.
The great Willis, bring up those Knicks, baby. Let's beat Indiana. Not from Connecticut, from Colorado. He's the guitar guy. He's a future VP analyst, DevOps, Mitch Ashley. Mitchell, good to see you.
Fresh off the plane from Microsoft Build. Good to be back in Colorado. So
absolutely good to have you home. And then running the anchor leg in this 6x100. I don't think they have a 6x100, but he's also recently home from Boston, where he went up not to see a Red Sox game.
I'm still in Boston.
Oh, you're still in Boston. Maybe you are going to see the Red Sox. I don't know. You Benedict Arnold, you. Our Chief Content Officer, Mike Vizard.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I went to college up here, but I'm up here for this Red Hat event, and I saw some old friends that I haven't seen in about 20 years. But I got to say, when I was in college, they promised me flashbacks, and they haven't arrived. So
there you go. There you go. All right. Hey, let's jump into things, guys. So, Mitch, you did a report. I think it's on the Futurum Intelligence panel, but it basically, talks about platform engineering seems to be gaining real traction, especially in organizations where you've got cloud native, AI, enhanced cybersecurity. Mike, you wrote an article on it. I put up something too. What's the story here, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like from the report, Mitch, that to Alan's point, there is a lot of traction being gained, but it was interesting to me, at least, the drivers are different. You hear a lot of folks talking about cost and then developer productivity, and it seems like it's just a smorgasbord of different things that are all coming together. But what's your assessment, and where are we on this journey?
Well, Mike, platform engineering has a characteristic similar to DevOps, is that it's pretty adaptable. to what you need and what you do in your organization. So I think that's one of the reasons why there's such a variety of technologies that are involved in what is a platform, whether it's development tools for developers and how that shifts in the age of AI, but also, Kubernetes and where we run that everywhere within the organization, or whether that's AI workloads or microservices workloads or other things, because of course we're using Kubernetes for so much. So one of the things this report did is we do a decision maker survey, excuse me, that we update frequently. And I did want to really look in kind of a comprehensive look across the software development lifecycle, but particularly honing in on platform engineering. And one of the reasons is because when you think about the platform engineering market, it isn't just tools that platform engineering might use, like an Ansible or some from a Red Hat or someone like that. It's all the technologies that they manage and work with and then have influence over buying. Our market estimates, just looking at platform engineering as a kind of segment itself, are about 15, almost 16 billion in revenue by 2028. When you layer on the other technologies, cloud native tools, software security, platforms that they might support, it just depends on what you layer in. But those being core things that they do, I mean, you're talking about 150, so really 10x of what a billion of what they really influence in the organization. Well, guess what? Vendors recognize that. I tell you, Alan knows this. You know this. How many people do we talk to that say, "Yeah, we're targeting or we're pivoting to talk to platform engineers," and that's why, because they play such. Even if they don't do the purchasing, they're the folks that are going to implement. They're the folks that are going to be part of the selection, maybe strong influence over what those selections are.
Especially cybersecurity, right? Fred, I don't know if you're talking about complexity, Fred. I just came off my podcast set where I recorded an episode of the Platform Engineering Show with my friend Luca Galante, who runs platformengineering.org. And I asked him this question, Mitch, right? What are the key indicators where you should be using platform engineering? Is it that you're doing digital transformation? Are you running Kubernetes? And those are kind of obvious. But he said, Alan, it's really the biggest indicator is your complexity, right? If your infrastructure, and I don't care whether that infrastructure is in the cloud or on-prem, if your infrastructure, your IT processes, as the complexity grows, and complexity grows, it's almost like the law of entropy in the universe, right? It's more complex, not less complex. As your complexity grows, the more you have a need to bring order to chaos, to try, because otherwise the complexity will eat you up, right, Fred?
100%. A lot of the challenges that, we run into today, or, the last handful of companies doing this kind of work, is really about the technology that we have, the technology we're integrating with, and also this thing called agility. And from a cybersecurity perspective, there's a lot to be made of whether or not, MCP does this and authentication, that, but the complexity of being able to interconnect all the technologies to perform these functions is dramatically lower when you can, sort of box it into a couple of areas and continuously redeploy it. So there's another set of hands on how many people touch that code, and also the frequency with which you deploy. So, the historical thoughts on, well, we'll sort of FANG universe, we'll redeploy every day. We'll deploy 10 times a day. I think the challenge is, as that complexity, and there's drift involved in that complexity, starts to take more shape, the AI portion of the universe that's starting to creep in is dramatically driving a shift. And so my question is, from a cybersecurity perspective, do we see the end of engineers and only have platform engineering?
I don't know. You come up with a good question there, because I'm having the same conversations here in Red Hat, where if I describe platform engineering to DevOps engineers, they kind of listen patiently, and then they go, yeah, we do that, but they feel like maybe they've been doing that all along. And I think it's different opinions about what the level of complexity is and what that mission statement is. At the same time, though, it's pretty clear that there is an effort to centralize DevOps going on, and people are trying to figure out how not to have, 9 different CI/CD platforms running everywhere. So there's a drive from the executive side to kind of embrace something called platform engineering that brings some order to the chaos. But I don't know, Mitch, what's your take on what is the line between what we're calling DevOps and platform engineering going to be?
I think platform engineering covers a wide variety of areas, and a lot of organizations are subsuming or incorporating platform DevOps engineering or DevOps into their platform engineering teams because they're maintaining tools for developers now, and they're obviously maintaining pipelines of things that are happening across the development processes. So it's a pretty natural fit, especially if you want to centralize. And I think one of the benefits, we think about centralizing and focusing on costs, and certainly cost can be a reason for doing that. Another is that you can take a handful of talented people, and they can in platform engineering who are doing DevOps too, or maybe a combination of both. They can serve as a force multiplier in the organization. If you're improving the productivity of lots of people, that's a force multiplier. So it isn't just cost. And yes, it's cost, and all the time, all those other folks would have done the same thing or duplicative or chaotic kinds of things that overlap. But I think that's one of the bigger advantages is that you can actually be more effective at delivering software, operating software, doing upgrading, addressing some of the toil, things like that.
You know, here's what this Shimmy's take on it. I always thought of DevOps, right, as the event horizon is deployment. From coding to deployment, live the land of DevOps, right? Middle Earth. Beyond that event horizon, DevOps engineers didn't really see, or the DevOps folks didn't see too much other than, what we used to call application APM, application performance management, but basically it was feedback loops. Post that event horizon, we really didn't have a lot of control. That was the land of the SREs. That was a different trilogy. And but we get some feedback loops that we would put back into our development process. But clearly the event horizon was deployment. So and when we shifted left further into the point of where we develop code, right? And it went that way. I think of platform engineering as their event horizon is where we start coding. Everything platform engineering does takes place before we start coding by putting everything in place for you to go code. And this is a very simplistic view of it, I realize, but that's their event horizon. They work to the left of where coders code. They're putting everything in place so that when coders code, it's in there. I think another really good way of looking at this is, hey, the software game has changed. How we develop, deploy, and run software is very different than it was when I first, Mitch and I were at Still Secure, and I met Fred back then. Today, software very much is in a factory, and we got a lot of factory workers like you do in every factory. The platform engineering people, they kind of design the factory, if you will, where this machine's going to go, where this takes place.
You're saying the Shire is like before we code, and what is CI/CD? Is that Mordor? Is that where that
kind of? Yeah, if you're going to go with this Tolkien thing, Lord of the Rings. But that's where it is. But DevOps engineers work in the factory. Developers work in the factory. Cybersecurity folks, DevSecOps folks, they all work in the factory, right? And that's the modern, and I know a lot of us want to say we're craftspeople and it's still a craftsman and, we're guild members or something, but no, it's a factory. And I think that's where we are.
It's funny you said the factory because that's something that Microsoft was bringing up about. You remember early on, Gates talked about the software factory. This has been in the 80s and 90s. And now that's it's coming back around of thinking about this with AI and agents and agentic capabilities of it becoming even more of a factory metaphor because it isn't as craftsman-like as you were describing of, slinging code and things like
No, it's
that.
not. I mean, we used to think of it as like small craft shops and like, the guildsmen and stuff, but it very much is. And just like in modern factories where we have robots and AI, empowered robots building our cars and our appliances and everything else, we're going to have AI in this factory too.
I think the interesting part here is to me, right? DevOps and platform engineering are now the same role, 100%,
You think
and
so?
they
It's
are
100% the same overlap.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think part of that, if I might step out of the Tolkien sort of analogy and maybe into, if you think about an orchestra and a conductor, and all my platform engineers are also all my DevOps guys. They help orchestrate all of the guys that write code from cradle to grave in the development lifecycle, from the first steps of, well, you need to use these tools in order to get started here, all the way through testing, validation, production deployment, and by the way, operational response when your code doesn't work the way it should. And if everybody's on the same page, right, to stay with this analogy here, then, you can actually make some music. Otherwise, there's an awful lot of friction in, development style or culture. And I think that's, to me, they're the keepers of the culture on how to do that effectively. So you can have measurements like agility and, you can time to, remediate something by redeployment, by, knowing everything that a particular type of service touches. And that's kind of what I would say is the bedrock for doing that successfully today. So my thoughts, they're all the same. It's the same role. It's the same group of folks. And to Mitch's point, they have been doing this a long time.
I just wonder if we're starting to see some more separation between what we called CI and CD, right? Developers do most of the CI stuff, and maybe the platform engineers are going to handle more of the deployment side of this equation, because there'll be more standardization on the platforms, which is enabled by Kubernetes. I think previously we had, all these Snowflake platforms, so it was really hard to be a platform engineer. But I think, there's a reason why platform engineering and Kubernetes are going together hand in hand. And I think that separation is a good thing, because, to be honest, I think we've sucked at CD forever.
So let me just be clear. You don't mean Snowflake, the company. You mean snowflakes like they're all individuals.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Just check it. Well, it certainly, look, as I said, I was just on with Luca doing this platform engineering podcast. Look, they're going to have 35, 40,000 people registered for PlatformCon. So whatever it is, it's pretty popular, right? That big community.
Yeah, if I can just put a plug in, the research that's behind this report comes out on a portal or a platform called Futurum Intelligence, and we issue some reports that are a subset of that, and there also are vendors that subscribe to that to get access to analysts. And one of the things that's nice about it is this isn't like Gartner or Forrester pricing. No dig at them, but we know they're not cheap. This is something that people in the tools business and the software, the Kubernetes or whatever, can easily have access to it. So reach out to us. We're not salespeople. Reach out to us if you're interested in getting more in depth and access to analysts, and we're glad to help you.
Yeah, I think I have links to it in his Platform Engineering for Cool Kids article on the site. Anyway, hey, let's take a break. We're going to come back and talk about, it's a Google AI world. Well, it's an AI world for everyone, but what makes Google special here? But of course, they've got a conference going on too. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
All right, folks, we're back. And as Alan alluded to, there's more shows this week than you can shake a stick at. And of course, Google joined the party as well. And John, you covered this whole thing, but I was reading your article on techstrong.ai and my eyes started to cross. I mean, they were sprinkling AI into everything, and including the glasses.
That was their goal, I think. So yesterday we talked about this. We talked about setting a narrative among all these AI shows or events, and we kind of came to the conclusion that NVIDIA probably does the best job because they've corralled this constellation of content creators. So they form a story and you can follow it. Not so much with Google. I actually came away from this event. It wasn't just a kitchen sink strategy, Mike, but I think what they were trying to do is give their company an AI makeover, essentially, when you add it all up. And in a sense, I think what they're moving towards is making Gemini a AI operating system of sorts. So yes, there was a hodgepodge of stuff that was a fusillade. It was a fire hose of products. So I'll just mention a couple of them to give you an idea of how it pinged and ponged. There was no logical flow to the conversation. It was a 2-hour morass of news and services. And hey, this is cool. Look at this. Oh, wait. Now look at this. So there's a new tab in Google search. It's something called AI mode. So you could post longer queries. You can post up to 10 questions at a time and then follow up and then post follow-up questions. So they threw that out at us. They mentioned, but they didn't provide much detail about Gemini 2.5 Pro DeepThink, which they're talking about as an enhanced reasoning mode. And they're making the comparisons to what it can do compared to OpenAI's O1 Pro or O3 Pro models. But they didn't provide more context than that. There was the DeepMind CEO who referred to this goal of making Gemini a world model that's capable of making plans and imagining new experiences by simulating aspects of the world just like the brain does. You're getting the gist. There were the return of Google Glasses, something called the Android XR project. So they're partnering with Warby, Parker, Samsung, and others. There was a new asynchronous coding agent, Jules, that would conceivably compete with Codex and Copilot. So again, a lot of news, a lot of scattered attention, a lot of oohs and ahs. I think the takeaway for me is that we are going to mix AI into every conceivable corner of our business, and we are going to fundamentally try to stamp ourselves as the IO company. Although I think, in a sense, and I said this yesterday, I think Microsoft probably did a better job of making its pitch as NVIDIA did. So
I have a selfish question though up front. So all 6 of the people on this show are wearing glasses. Can this thing work with prescription glasses, or is it just like I'm gonna have to like put it over my?
Can you say that again? I didn't quite catch that.
They never ever do, and in a lot of the headsets, you actually have to have a special bezel to accommodate glasses. So, like the Apple Vision Pro, I was trying a friend's, and you were there, John, at South by Southwest last year, and I had to do it blind because there was no effective way to wear my glasses with it. But back to Google, I was genuinely curious how you were gonna summarize this conference because it was just like a series of overlapping announcements, and some of the products were eerily similar to others and had fun names like Project Mariner. I really love Casey Newton's one line on it. I'm a big Casey Newton fan. He said, "At Google I/O, everything is changing and normal and scary and chill." Because last year they were pitching us on the webs. We're going to use AI to read the web for you. It's going to read you. You just hang back, guys, and it's cool. That was last year, remember? This year was like, well, you're using AI and you're going to use it for everything you do. And here's why. And they're obviously trying to catch up to ChatGPT. I was an early fangirl of Gemini because I like the integrations. I like that, boom, it was right there at my Gmail, Maps, like all the stuff. And I'm on, Google everything, right, for business. And it fell behind very quickly. So the DeepSeek announcement and the nod from the DeepSeek people were obviously them trying to say, hey, we're as good as ChatGPT now, by the way. It's not.
we don't have any imminent news for you. It was like the whole thing to me was like AI ADHD. It was just it was scattered.
It was lazy. It was lazy in that they didn't bring it to a finer point for you to say this is the killer thing, because there was no killer thing. It was a lot of
But ain't that the truth about AI in general? What's the killer thing?
Yeah, that's what everybody's in pursuit. So
I mean, look, to me, this is akin to making a party. I love making a good party. But what they served up here was a veritable smorgasbord, right? But there was no main course. That's what you're saying. There was no entree. It was a smorgasbord. Everybody was finger food kind of stuff, and it didn't all necessarily even come together. They had their pasta station here, Oriental station there, maybe lamb, lollipop lamb chops over there, but
there was no
there
gabagool.
was no gabagool, not gabagool.
Are you saying?
But
Are you
anyway,
saying it was Are you saying it was an AI potluck?
yeah, it
Come
was
on.
an AI potluck. That's a good way. But
I mean, the glasses were the most
yeah,
interesting
no,
to
but let me
me.
just be clear, because first of all, Ed, I've played with the Meta goggles, and they do have an insert that you put in if you have glasses on that kind of keep it off you. But that's not the glasses we're talking about, right? Those are different droids. They're these glasses that just have a recorder in them. And I will tell you, every time I go into a Ray-Ban store, I get FOMO. I try them on and I want to buy them, but I need readers in my sunglasses. Otherwise, it's hard for me. And you can't get them with readers, and you can't get a prescription lens on these Google. Well, I don't know about the Google glasses, but with the Ray-Bans, you can't. Ray-Ban's Meta, by the way. It's a Meta glass.
they did a demo backstage. It was pretty choppy, and the latency wasn't very good. And for some bizarre reason, for you NBA fans, Giannis was part of this demo. He showed up and said something.
Well, he's looking
just
for a new contract and a team, so
okay.
he's going to be out there.
This is a conspiracy to make you get laser eye surgery so you can have 20/20 vision so you can use these glasses. See, that's how it works.
No,
I
but
think glasses are just going to read it for you. You
but
don't need
seriously,
readers.
that's one of the things I want. Like, again, what's the killer app here, right? These glasses.
So can I?
Go ahead, John.
Later that day, I went up to San Francisco to
Of
moderate
course you
a
did.
panel at an autonomous panel in technology. So I was on a panel with these guys who are IT decision makers at Wells Fargo, Barclays, and then a guy who was at a startup. And I mentioned the Google I/O announcement, and they all looked at me and said, "What was it?" And I said, "This is why I want to ask you about this. How do you make rhyme or reason when you're supposed to be using AI agents eventually? There's all this pressure on you to enact these plans." And they said, "This is adding to our uncertainty, and our doubt is like we're not getting a clear message from a lot of these companies." And to us, it was just like, as you said, Alan, a smorgasbord of, "Hey, this is cool. Wow, look at this. Oh, this is kind of similar to what we did a year ago or 2 years ago. We mentioned." And that was their takeaway from that. I mean, they have different opinions about other companies, but I think we're in this process of falling within this trap as the hype continues and companies feel this urgency. I'm talking about the big tech companies feel this urgency to prove themselves. And I'm wondering, it's teeing me up to what happens when Apple comes out in WWDC in June, and what are they going to talk about since they're so far behind with Apple Intelligence?
That's going to be interesting.
That may be the vacuum they were attempting to fill, right?
Maybe they always are. Yes. Yes.
So I guess the future is, we used to say there's an app for that. Now we're just going to say there's an AI for that. So
There's an agent for that.
Right. And then notice none of you have mentioned Grok. Have any of you even tried Grok?
I don't try Grok on political grounds.
Well, I separate the art from the artist. I have to because my profession requires me to be on Twitter. So I've had to go that route. I separate the art from the artist. But I would say Grok is getting a lot better. Being late to the party was a key advantage to them. They were able to benefit from the learning of everyone else. But I noticed they're not really inserted into these kinds of conversations that I'm having.
actually, Microsoft, to their credit, has Grok up on Azure now. So there you go.
Elon was in their keynote. Hey, I have a question for you, John. I was invited to go to I/O and I just couldn't work it out scheduling wise. But from afar, it seemed less of a developer conference and more of a consumer products Is that true? Am I reading that right?
No, that you are absolutely, you're spot on. You're spot on, Mitch. I think they're trying to pivot more towards the wider audience. Yes. And that's why they chose the demos they did. Most of them were all, um, here's a vacation home example. We're going to translate languages between two people in different countries. And here's how a video for content creators. Here's every example was a real life example. And it struck me as trying to be, and I think you said this earlier, Apple-esque.
So,
They don't, they
but
always
to
fall
be
short.
fair to Google, right? Yes, Google I/O has become a consumer show. But Mitch, you were just at Google Next last month, right? And that was very much a cloud and developer orientated event.
That was infrastructure developer to I'm just noting that, and I'm not being critical of it. It's, it goes where they want it to go. But, if I was a developer going to Google I/O, I might have been disappointed. Might have been more satisfied by going to Google Next, Cloud Next. So, but that was much more platforms and building applications and that kind of thing. So it's just things are evolving. So changing expectations of what I/O is.
I think my takeaway from reading everything I've been reading, and I've been following it, Google is a key part of my day-to-day. I have to know what's going on at the company, is everything is changing, but not that fast.
Yeah. Well, not as fast as the announcements come out of them. I'll call it as I see it. That's what I see. Anyway, hey, let's take a break here on the gang. We're going to come back. Our next block is a report from our man in Boston. The Yankee goes to Boston. Not a Connecticut Yankee. No, a New York Yankee goes to Boston. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
Well, continuing on the theme of, yes, there's another show, and yes, there was another smorgasbord of announcements and tons of stuff going on, but I'm going to focus on two that seem to really make a difference or matter. One is Red Hat is up here, and they have Ansible, and they put an MCP server into Ansible. This is interesting because now an AI agent can call Ansible and automate a workflow or set up a task or get something going remotely that a human has vetted, at least as something that will have an outcome that is reliable. So that's pretty cool stuff in the sense of it gives you a view into the future of IT automation in the Gen AI age. The second thing they did is they announced that they're going to put together a project around a containerized version of something called VLLM. This is a software stack being developed, I guess, originally by the folks over in Berkeley in California. And this is starting to gain traction as an alternative to CUDA. People are starting to say, I don't want to get locked into CUDA from NVIDIA, so we're going to build a software stack in the open source community that looks a lot like CUDA, but does a couple of key things. One is it runs on anything. So CUDA, as you may know, is pretty much locked into GPUs, and I guess NVIDIA plans to bring out some CPUs of their own in the future. But right now, you can have a stack that will run on NVIDIA, it will run on AMD, it will run on Intel, and pretty much anything else that you want it to run on. So I think that is going to gain some traction. And then the second cool thing about it is the way Red Hat built it, it can run on a distributed set of Kubernetes clusters. So you can break up the processing and the loads across multiple CPUs and multiple nodes. And that way, you're not trying to build a mainframe type environment for every AI workload. You can distribute this out more aggressively. Now, that all said, God bless Red Hat, but I know I came to an open source an open source event, but this is pretty much feels like an IBM conference.
So let me pile on. when you say it's open source, was it released under a true open source license, Mike, or is it this bastardized thing that they've been doing with Red Hat Enterprise Linux?
Yeah. VLLM actually came to them through. It's a true open source project
Because it
and
came out of Berkeley, the Berkeley
Yes,
license.
Neuromagic had a hand in it. The source code's up on GitHub, but it is I don't know if there are extensions to it, but
Yeah,
it
it
started
is
that
not
way.
clear that the container extensions that Red Hat came up with will be under that same license, or if they're going to give that back to the
If
community.
it's not an OSI recognized license, it's not open source. That's it.
They haven't gotten that far in terms of how they're going to position it. So, I mean, basically, they're just showing that they came up with a containerized version of it. Now, whether or not you need that, I don't know. I mean, some folks like containers, but they are saying it will be an open source project and a product. So they were careful in their phrasing.
Now, here's another thing, though, Mike. I wasn't at this event. I was in Boston, as you know. I left Sunday the day before, though I saw them all setting up. My hotel was next door to the conference center. To me, this very much looked like the final assimilation by the Borg of Red Hat. The Red Hat that we knew, that I've known, right, as the shining city to paraphrase Ronald Reagan, as the shining city on the hill of open source, right? The example that we all strive to. Where's there an open source success story? Red Hat. Be the first $1 billion open source company, right? That Red Hat's gone. You're right. It's part of IBM. It's been Borged. And they still have really cool stuff, and they still give out the red hats as well as other stuff. But to me, it fundamentally feels different.
Yeah. You know who's not here? It's like it's not a scientific poll, but one of the things I'm not seeing as I walk around is that classic kind of open source contributor, maintainer people, and all those folks. Mainly the folks here are classic IT administrators, DevOps engineers, and they all work for big companies. And we're not seeing this kind of like, I don't know where the cool kids went in the open source community, but they didn't come to this event this week.
Well,
So I have a
it's gone from Red Hat Linux to, yes, that's still there, but it's obviously OpenShift. It's infrastructure software infrastructure, right? And the Ansible acquisition and folding that into MCP, which I agree with you for calling that out. That's important as well. So it resembles more of an IBM company because it's not just a Red Hat open source. Yes, we've commercialized it and brought it to enterprises. So it's changed a lot. Fred, I stepped on you. Were going to say something.
Yeah, not at all. So I agree with you. And I think my question here is, so it's great that this validates the, prolific use of MCP, which is kind of becoming the standard. But, it's expensive to run models locally. It's expensive to run in your infrastructure. I really want to know how this is tied to cloud infrastructure, which cloud service providers are going to adapt this. There are a million other infrastructure providers that cloud providers already have. So this feels very me too, but I just don't know. If we're talking about IBM's cloud, okay, I can understand that. But for me right now, if I chose to run on Google, Azure, or AWS, I have all this functionality built into my cloud provider. I don't need any of this anymore. And they missed the window.
They would argue that it's a hybrid world and you're going to centralize the management of multiple clouds. So you don't want to get tied into too many specific cloud platforms. And so they're making a case for a horizontal layer of software, essentially, that allows you to centralize the management, going back to platform engineering, without getting too locked into a particular cloud service provider. I don't know how successful that strategy is because they and VMware, for that matter, have been making the same case for a while. But I still see all these independent little stacks out there that people are managing with dedicated teams. So maybe that will all come together in the platform engineering era. But to your point, I would agree. Right now, everything is isolated.
It would be really good to get some financial numbers on what it looks like to do the same kind of workloads across each of these environments using the same infrastructure. Because I think as far as I see it, the problem here isn't the adoption, it's the cost. And in today's universe, the cost is super king for all the platform engineers.
And there is this thing called token shock when it comes to AI, right? You got to pay for the input and the output, and it quickly adds up. And so a lot of people are, you talk to some people and they're like, well, I built this LLM and it cost about $1.5 million to eliminate the jobs of 2 people making 50 grand a year. So it's
Hey, that's progress.
There's another maybe subtle item. I'm curious, Mike, how much they highlighted this, but part of what's kind of behind this the LLM, is they are offering in the commercial service, I believe, a curated model repository. So, you're not going to Hugging Face or every other place in the world to get your models. We had the same week, there wasn't a conference, but Docker announced their Docker hardened images repository as part of their Docker hub. So we're seeing more people doing this. We saw this at SUSE. They announced kind of the similar thing, right, Alan,
Yeah.
when we were there about
SUSE images
curating images.
stripped
That
down
seems to
and
be part of
secured.
that infrastructure now of where are we getting in our software and platform pipeline, where is this stuff coming from? AI models included.
So the funny thing about that is that the Red Hat curation service actually resides on Hugging Face. So basically, they're just creating a little segmented section of Hugging Face that they are saying this is the models that we think work versus the, I guess, maybe riffraff models on Hugging Face. But I
Have
don't
the good housekeeping seal of Red Hat.
It's really, they call it the blue blood, as in
The blue
IBM,
blood. Okay.
big blue. Um,
But I mean, isn't it good to be able to mix and match hardware and platforms? I mean, I think moving away from CUDA-based infrastructure is going to cause some problems and compatibility challenges, but I think that it's good. I think, everybody being locked into CUDA, NVIDIA's CUDA, I don't think that's
well,
good
it's
for
not
anyone.
good if you're a relatively shorter guy in a leather jacket.
Who loves waffles?
Yeah,
Those waffles.
just saying.
And pleased with androids.
It all
R2D2.
depends who's looking. It all
But
depends.
to Fred's point, we've seen this story time and time again. Nobody seems, everybody gives lip service to portability and we need to not get locked in. And yet we find a way to lock ourselves in every time.
Absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
always the optimization problem or the theory of the optimization problem or the over optimization problem.
Or we swing the pendulum.
Yeah,
and
it's
we
always
swing
the
it back.
pendulum. Like, I want one throat to choke. I want best of breed. I want, I don't want to be locked in, but I want stability. We want our cake and eat it too. And sometimes you can't. You just can't be all things to all people.
Well, at least we're gone are the days of we're open, and as long as you use our APIs, we're open.
No, we embrace and extend it. We
But-
embrace
and-
and
and-
extend.
And some of this is still branding, right? A lot of people now identify themselves as NVIDIA something or other. And it's just like back in the bad old days when people said they were a VMware admin or an Oracle DBA and they attached their job too closely to the platform.
What's interesting though with this move to platforms and all of these offerings in here talking about Red Hat, but in Google and Mitchell, you mentioned SUSE and some of the others, is they've all picked up the security baton and said, hey, we're going to take care of the security here. When you use one of my modules, or you use one of my containers, or you use one of my distros, one of the reasons to do it is because we're securing it. We're making sure it's secure. And, this was always, I think, one of the things for me about cloud security, which is, you're going to tell me you're securing the platform, but when shit hits the fan, it's still my butt on the line, right? So I'm glad that I used that Docker hardened image or that SUSE image or the Red Hat thing. But when I get the breach, and the bricks come tumbling down, they tumble down on me.
Mm-hmm. That's called shared responsibility.
Yeah.
We have empathy for you.
It's called hot potato.
No, but
Here you go.
this is a problem in this model, and it's a problem that I think, Fred, this, right? In security, it's a problem that security people have grappled with since 2005, which is, You want me to trust you to do my security, but I still bear the responsibility for it. And, and so that, in order for me to do that, you got to open the kimono a little bit and show me why this is so hardened, why this is so secure, why I should put, my company on the line based upon what you're trying to secure. Now, flip side is a lot of organizations say, well, you got a lot more resources to secure than we do. So we're going to put our eggs in your basket. But
there's an interesting conversation to be had when you look at the way that you containerize a platform, common applications, workloads. To say that, Java, okay, well, the versions of Java my company uses, right? I want that in a containerized so I can optimize the patching, the consistency and delivery of that. And then I have the platform. So like Mitch was talking about earlier, so whether it's Red Hat or it's SUSE, whatever the operating system is. My question is, I appreciate that we want to harden those containers, but, something more about polymorphic security here. Don't make me go figure out or deal with vulnerabilities. Go find them and patch them and do that automatically and bring that to me. Instead of, I've got this level of container security to maintain, then I've got applications, then I've got my infrastructure, right? The simplicity of that is, if your job is one thing, make a secure operating system, do that dynamically, and then allow me to get the benefits of that for my hardened Docker image or whatever the case may be. I'd love to get there. That's when we talk about the fundamentals of security, the hygiene, right? Shimmy, this hasn't changed in 20 plus years. The hygiene is still this critical moment here. So, all of this other stuff is really interesting. However, if we could use the tools today to solve the problems from 20 years ago, why wouldn't we?
Right. But if I automate this vulnerability fixes, Mitch is going to complain that you broke my application because, we didn't test it and all this other stuff. And so,
You got chocolate in my peanut butter.
Anyway, hey guys, we're about out of time. What a great gang today. Some really heady discussion. I thought we were mature about our discussion. It didn't devolve into throwing names or anything. So, Fred, you were a good influence on the panel today. Can't wait to have you back on, man. Thank you for.
Got to throw some credit to Ann too.
Well, Ann always brings a touch of class to it. She keeps John in line.
We don't want Fred. We don't want Fred to run away. So we're on our best.
We're on our best behavior. Anyway, hey, I hope you've enjoyed this Techstrong Gang. Remember, we've got another full, I don't know how many hours of Techstrong TV backing this up. So don't go anywhere. Watch that if you're watching this on our daily feed. If you're watching this on our OTT channel that just came out on Apple or Amazon or Roku or Android or iOS, thank you for downloading the OTT. You may be watching this on YouTube or any of our Techstrong stations, channels, websites. Thank you. Until next time, though, this is Alan Schummel for Techstrong Gang. We're out of here.